On July 29, 2026, the Federal Reserve voted 9-3 to hold interest rates steady. And all three dissents pushed the same direction, demanding a hike instead. That has not happened since September 2016. And unified three-way hawkish dissent specifically hit its most divided point in nearly a decade. Dallas Fed President Lori Logan, Cleveland's Beth Hammack, and Minneapolis Chief Neel Kashkari all broke from Fed Chair Kevin Warsh, who held the benchmark rate at 3.5 to 3.75% anyway. Warsh's own response was blunt. He said he asked for, quote, a good family fight. And he got one. Markets did not shrug this off. Within hours, traders had pushed the odds of a September rate hike past 57%. The question worth answering is not whether three officials disagreed. That is normal. It is whether this particular disagreement actually tells you where rates are headed next. Or whether it is noise dressed up as a signal. Federal Reserve votes are usually close to unanimous. A single dissent draws attention. Three dissents, all favoring the same alternative, is rare enough that you have to go back a decade to find a comparable case. And even the closest recent precedent, a split vote in September 2019 during the trade war period, involved dissents pulling in different directions rather than one unified bloc. This time, Logan, Hammack, and Kashkari were not disagreeing about the general direction of policy. They explicitly wanted a quarter-point hike immediately, arguing inflation was not cooling fast enough to justify standing still. Warsh, only in his second meeting as chair, held the line, framing the split as healthy debate rather than institutional dysfunction. But three regional Fed presidents publicly breaking with the chair in his second month is not a small internal disagreement. It is a visible signal that the committee's usual consensus-building process is under real strain. And that matters because markets price Fed credibility partly on how unified the committee appears. The dissent did not happen in a vacuum. Second quarter GDP grew just 1.5%. Missing the 1.8% economists expected. While the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, still put annual inflation at 3.7%, well above the Fed's 2% target. That combination, slower growth alongside sticky inflation, is exactly the kind of data that splits a committee. Because it does not clearly support either cutting or holding, let alone tightening further. Jobless claims also ticked up to 197,000 for the week. A modest increase, but one more data point suggesting the labor market is cooling. Traders reading the dissent alongside this data pushed September hike odds past 57%. Within the day, that is a meaningful repricing, not a rounding error, and it reflects a real bet that three regional presidents willing to publicly dissent in Warsh's second meeting are unlikely to fall silent by September without new evidence pointing the other way. The Fed's next meeting is scheduled for September 15 and 16, 2026, and a hike is not locked in. It is described by analysts as finely balanced. Between now and then, the committee will see 2 more inflation prints and 2 more jobs reports, any one of which could shift the calculus in either direction. A cooler than expected CPI reading would hand Warsh cover to hold the line and quiet the hawks. A hotter one would strengthen the case Logan, Hammack, and Kashkari already made. Developments in the Middle East, which have been feeding into energy price volatility, are also being watched as a wild card that could push inflation either way through fuel costs. In other words, the July dissent tells you what 3 officials believed on July 29. Based on the data available that day, it does not lock in what 9 or 12 Officials will believe on September 16. After 2 more months of data land on the table. Here is the real limitation. Dissent votes are a snapshot of disagreement, not a forecast. Fed officials dissent for all kinds of reasons beyond pure data disagreement. Institutional positioning, regional economic conditions specific to their district, or simply wanting their concerns on the record before a chair still new to the job. A three-way hawkish dissent raises the probability of a September hike. It does not guarantee one. And markets have priced in Fed moves before that did not materialize. Sometimes repeatedly in the same year. 57% odds means the market itself is not confident. It is closer to a coin flip than a certainty. There is also a selection effect worth naming. The loudest dissents get the most coverage, which can make internal Fed disagreement look more decisive than it is. 2 CPI prints and 2 jobs reports are a lot of room for this specific narrative to fall apart entirely before September even arrives. Quick recap. The Fed held rates steady on a 9-3 vote. Its most divided decision since 2016. With 3 regional presidents publicly demanding a hike instead. That dissent, combined with a GDP miss and inflation still running above target, pushed September hike odds past 57%. So, signal or noise? Split verdict. The dissent itself is genuine signal. Real, rare, and reflective of authentic disagreement about whether inflation is cooling fast enough. But treating it as a reliable prediction of what the full committee does in September is noise. That outcome still depends on 2 CPI reports, 2 jobs reports, and geopolitical developments that have not happened yet. Watch the data, not the vote count. Subscribe for the economic stories that separate what actually happened from what markets are betting will happen next. Signal from the noise. Every week.